Hello, and welcome back to the AI versus Human podcast. Today, we have a very interesting take on human input versus AI input. I will be taking a section from Chapter 3 of Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique and pasting it into ChatGPT and asking it to rewrite it, but with a modern context. I will then be critiquing this rewrite in the understanding of gender roles today. I will be giving my initial reaction through this podcast, as I had not prepared an answer beforehand or have read the AI rewrite until now. I will then be pointing out the strengths, inaccuracies, and what's missing in the AI's understanding. Let's start by reading the original section from the novel itself. Chapter 3, The Crisis in Women's Identity, by Betty Friedan. I discovered a strange thing interviewing women of my own generation over the past 10 years. When we were growing up, many of us could not see ourselves beyond the age of 21. We had no image of our own future, of ourselves as women. I remember the stillness of a spring afternoon on the Smith campus in 1942, when I came to a frightening dead end in my own vision of the future. A few days earlier, I had received a notice that I won a graduate fellowship. During the congratulations, underneath my excitement, I felt a strange uneasiness. There was a question that I did not want to think about. Is this really what I want to be? The question shut me off, cold and alone, from the girls talking and studying on the sunny hillside behind the college house. I thought I was going to be a psychologist, but if I wasn't sure, what did I want to be? I felt the future closing in, and I could not see myself in it at all. I had no image of myself, stretching beyond college. I had come at 17 from a Midwestern town, an unsure girl, the wide horizons of the world, and the life of the mind that had been open to me. I had begun to know who I was and what I wanted to do. I could not go back now. I could not go home again to the life of a mother and the woman of our town, bound to a home, the bridge, shopping, children, husband, charity, and clothes. But now that the time had come to make my own future, to take the deciding step, I suddenly did not know what I wanted to be. I took the fellowship, but the next spring, under the alien California sun of another campus, the question came again, and I could not put it out of my mind. I had won another fellowship that would have committed to me the research of my doctorate, to a career as a professional psychologist. Is this what I really wanted to be? The decision now truly terrified me. I lived in the terror of indecision for days, unable to think of anything else. The question was not important, I told myself. No question was important to me that year but love. We walked in a Berkeley Hills, and a boy said, "Nothing can come of this between us. I'll never win a fellowship like yours." Did I think I would be choosing irrevocably the cold loneliness of that afternoon if I went on? I gave up the fellowship in relief, but for years afterward, I could not read a word of the science that once I had thought was as a future life's work. The reminder of its loss was too painful. Now that we read the original section of Chapter 3 from Betty Friedan's, now we are going to read the AI rewrite of the section we just read, The Crisis in Women's Identity, from ChatGPT. I noticed something strange while talking to women in my generation over the past 10 years. As we grew up, many of us couldn't picture life past our mid-20s. We had no clear image of ourselves as independent adults, only as daughters, girlfriends, or future wives and mothers. I remember sitting in a coffee shop during my final semester of college, scrolling through job listings, when I was struck by a wave of anxiety. A few days earlier, I had received an email congratulating me on being accepted into a competitive graduate program. My friends and professors were thrilled, but beneath my excitement, I felt uneasy. There was a question I didn't want to face. Is this really what I want? The thought left me cold, disconnected. Around me, other students laughed and chattered about weekend plans, internships, and post-grad adventures. I had always assumed I'd go into psychology, but now I wasn't sure. And if I wasn't certain, then what did I want? The future felt like a closing door, and beyond it, I saw nothing. No version of myself thriving past graduation. I had worked so hard to get here, but now I felt lost. I couldn't go backward. I couldn't return to my small hometown and slip into a routine of my mother and the woman before her, tied to home, caregiving, part-time jobs, and charity work. But now I had to make a real choice about my future. I suddenly didn't know who I wanted to be. I accepted the graduate program, but by the following spring, as I sat on a new campus under the California sun, the doubt returned. I had been offered another fellowship that would set me on the path towards a PhD and a career in research. But the thought terrified me. Is this really what I want? This time, I couldn't ignore the question. I spiraled into indecision for days, unable to focus on anything else. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Nothing mattered more than love, right? One evening, I walked through the city with someone I cared about. As we looked over the skyline, he said, "You know this can't last, right? I'll never follow you into a life like that." Did I really want to choose a future where I risked loneliness? I gave up the fellowship, telling myself I'd rather find another path, but for years, I couldn't even glance at a research paper without feeling a sharp sense of loss. I had once believed that work would be my life's purpose. The regret was too painful to comfort. I never really understood why I let go of that dream. I lived in the present, moving forward without ever looking back. Now, right off the bat, after reading the AI rewrite, I found it much easier to read. Reading the original section from Betty Friedan's 2013 version, I kind of stumbled while reading a lot and had to re-record myself. But what is interesting that I found right off the bat from the AI rewrite is that certain sections are bold, and it's mostly questions. And I found that kind of interesting because it sticks out. For example, the question, is this really what I want? Which is kind of the main theme of the original section, that longing, that questioning for the future and kind of questioning oneself. But in the modern context, the AI chose to bold the questions, kind of making it prominent and kind of already focusing and singling out those themes of longing and questioning. So the parts that are bolded is this really what I want? Is this really what I want again for the second time? And that kind of is interesting on its own. But another intriguing part is it bolded the question, nothing mattered more than love, right? Now, the only reason as to why I could think that the AI chose to bold that question is that maybe it's kind of choosing to signal out that, but in a different meaning. In a lens of gender roles, and as the chapter is titled The Woman's Identity, I fear that many women over the years, and perhaps especially during the time in 2013 of this book being written, there was many women's movements and many gender movements circling women and women's rights. And I feel that women were kind of known to be, like it said in the chapter, those, girlfriends, daughters, future wives, and mothers. We didn't really have a lot of role and character other than those ones. So I think that, again, coming from a gendered lens, it caught my eye that the AI would bold nothing mattered more than love, just because it kind of signals out that women equals love. And we are bred to keep breeding, and we are bred to be those lovers, be a good loving wife, be a good loving daughter, be a good loving mother. And from this certain chapter, titled "The Crisis in Women's Identity," that really does perpetuate through this chapter, a woman longing to find her future, to find her purpose, but well in doubt, that purpose always kind of falls back on the daughter, the girlfriend role, the wives, and the mothers. Another sentence that the AI chose to bold is, this can't last, right? I'll never follow you to a life like that. And this is where the woman was on a walk with, I'm guessing, could have been a significant other, or just someone she cared about, that said that to her. So again, it's very interesting as to why the AI would choose to bold that sentence, but nothing else in the in its rewrite. That could be because it's kind of showing an emphasis on, even though a woman, even though you are successful, and even though you are finding your purpose, and you are happy in being successful and smart, the man won't follow you into that. The men will not follow you into that path. And he's essentially saying, this cannot last. I will not follow you. So he won't follow kind of in your footsteps is what I'm interpreting here. But yes, initially this rewrite is definitely easier to read just from my mind, coming from someone who reads a lot of modern context articles, novels. The language that it chose to speak kind of favors into the later generations. The more modern generations, the generations that are kind of growing into the now of the world. It definitely speaks more sense, and it is just has a flow and a sense of cohesion to it. This is definitely an interesting take on gender roles. It doesn't take away from the sense of urgency and agency from the original section of the book. It doesn't take away from the emotion that the woman is trying to portray in this section. The longing, like I said, the questioning. It definitely doesn't take away from that, although it kind of adds, it talks about when I was struck with a wave of anxiety, which I feel, again, kind of adds to and favors into the generations that are of now. Maybe in 2013 or when this book is based on, they didn't have those titles. They didn't really talk about the emotions of anxiety. And that is very interesting that, the AI kind of stuck to its modern roots, and it added the anxiety instead of like, what does it say in the book here? I felt a strange uneasiness. So instead of the uneasiness, the AI chose to say struck with a wave of anxiety, which again, I think contributes to the easiness and the flow of this, of the rewrite, just because it grapples with a deeper meaning, and it grapples with a deeper sense of emotion. As we know, uneasiness is contributing to anxiety, but it kind of focuses on a deeper level of emotion than the original section does. Now, another difference that caught my eye between the AI rewrite and the original text is when in the AI rewrite, it asks the question, did I really want to choose a future where I risked loneliness? Now, in the original text, instead of this line, it reads, did I think I would be choosing irrevocably the cold loneliness of that afternoon if I went on? Now, the reason why I say that the AI rewrite is easier to understand and read, and did exactly what it had to do when I asked it to rewrite this script in a modern context. It did exactly that because it does not have any underlying meanings or like a puzzle that has to be solved in between the lines. Now, what I mean by that is in the question that I just read from the original text, it doesn't indicate future. You can obviously make an educated guess that that's what she meant, or that's what she is pointing towards. But in the AI rewrite, it just plain out full on says future. Am I risking a future of loneliness? But in the original text, it definitely uses more of that, not like kind of old fashioned language, like irrevocably. That has a lot of depth and meaning to it. Whereas the AI rewrite, again, like it was told to do, switches the language in a way that is modernized, in a way that makes sense to the context of today. Like I said before, mentioning anxiety and love and kind of bolding these questions. But in the original text, when she says the cold loneliness of that afternoon if I went on, she's basically saying that cold loneliness she felt in that afternoon, would this be a permanent feeling for the future? Whereas the AI rewrite kind of skips past the emotion and just basically just states, did I really want to choose a future where I risked loneliness? Now, I would like to point our attention to an insert by T.S. Goetz' article titled AI Art is Theft, Labor Extraction and Exploitation, or On the Dangers of Stochastic Pollux. Now, I read an interesting quote from this article that talks about, I know specifically from this section titled Introduction, a Contest, Protests, and Feminist Progasmic Computer Ethics. There is a quotation from here that reads, their tactics include flooding art sharing platforms with anti-AI messaging, callouts of media that employ AI-generated images instead of human-produced work, banning or flagging AI-generated art or art-sharing sites, image processing software that confuses or damages the AI training process, and legal action against AI developers. Now, this is found on page 5 of this article. Now, this article basically just, and this section overall talks about the ethics behind AI-generated images and AI-generated art and how that is kind of damaging. Now, this quotation that I read kind of connects to the whole role of this podcast and how the role of pasting what already is existing into creating what is, I would use the word fake, kind of like almost like a deep fake, because it's kind of rewording and restructuring already something that is existed. Now, the important part with AI is to keep it ethical and to know and to give recognition when AI is being used. And that is exactly what I am trying to do here, but as well pay respect to what already existed and what themes that Betty Friedan is trying to portray into her work. Now, it is very interesting kind of rewriting her context into a modernized version. And I wonder, after reading this quote from Goats, if this would be kind of a confusion or damage to the AI training process, and if this would be something for the future of legal action, and if AI can take the words and the context and the books that were once written and rewrite them to make something new, but to kind of call it their own instead of giving the recognition it deserves. And that is also very interesting as well, just because in the AI rewrite, it does still kind of hold true to the gender roles, especially today because of our modern generation and because the rewrite is modernized. It already kind of falls into our generation currently. And again, like I said, it talks about current issues that, like anxiety, like the original script does not. But it is kind of playing with a fine line of using AI, just like how Goat is talking about the flooding art sharing platforms with anti-AI messaging. There might be just an anti-AI version of this podcast as well. Now, not to say that I am pro AI in this case, but just for the sake of this project and kind of what I wanted to take from this and learn from it, it is very interesting to see how the AI has totally reformed and reconstructed the language of Betty Friedan's original text.